All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a really simple but honestly a super powerful story about how we learn. It's a framework that could totally change how you absorb new information, turning that feeling of frustration into real fluency.
So let me ask you, does this sound familiar? You spend hours cramming for something, repeating facts over and over, just trying to force them into your brain, only to find that a week later, poof, it's all gone. If you're nodding along, you are definitely not alone. It's a super common struggle, and it points to a flaw not in you, but in the method you're using. The solution actually comes from this wonderfully simple piece of wisdom. And this is the core idea for our entire explainer today. Learners are either sponges or they're rocks. It's this perfect metaphor that captures two fundamentally different ways of approaching knowledge. One leads to lasting mastery, and the other, well, not so much.
So let's start with the approach that, let's be honest, many of us fall into by default. This is the way of the rock. A rock learner kind of treats their brain like a surface. They're just trying to stack facts on top of it through sheer willpower and repetition. There's really no attempt to absorb the information, just to hold it there for a little while. You can think of it like painting a rock. Sure, the color is on it, but it hasn't changed the rock itself one bit.
And this is exactly why this method so often fails us. Knowledge gained this way is brittle. It just shatters under pressure, like during a big exam. The information hasn't been connected to anything else in your mind, so it just kind of floats there, ready to drift away. And maybe worst of all, if a question is phrased just a little bit differently than how you memorize the answer, you're totally stuck. The knowledge just isn't flexible.
Okay, so what's the alternative? Let's explore the much more powerful approach, the way of the sponge.
A sponge doesn't just get coated with water, right? It actually draws the water in, making it part of its very structure. A sponge learner does the exact same thing with information. They aren't just memorizing. They're actively working to absorb the meaning, the context, and all the connections of what they're learning.
And the benefits here are just immense. Because the knowledge is so deeply absorbed and connected to other things you know, it becomes flexible. You can actually apply it to new and unfamiliar problems. And it sticks with you for the long term, because it's now part of this huge network of ideas in your mind, not just some isolated, easy-to-forget fact.
So how do you actually become a sponge? Well, it really just boils down to two simple actions. First, you have to seek to understand. Don't just accept a fact. Ask, why is this true, and how does this actually work? And second, you have to imagine. Let's make this real. Say you're studying history. Instead of just memorizing a date, you understand by asking why that battle happened. Then you imagine by connecting its outcome to modern-day politics. Or if you're learning to code, you don't just copy a function. You understand why it works, and you imagine 3 new ways you could use it in a project.
When you lay the two paths side by side like this, the contrast is just stark. The rock relies on passive repetition, and that leads to brittle, short-term knowledge. But the sponge, on the other hand, uses active inquiry to build flexible, long-term understanding that you can apply pretty much anywhere. The difference is truly night and day.
So, here's the crucial point. How do we make this shift? How do we consciously move from being a rock to becoming a sponge in our day-to-day learning?
It all starts with a change in mindset. The goal of learning shouldn't be to just collect a giant pile of facts. It should be to build a deep, interconnected web of understanding. The quantity of knowledge is pretty meaningless if you can't use it, right? The quality of your understanding, that's everything.
The path forward isn't some complicated 10-step program. No, it just comes down to those 2 core actions. Before you try to memorize anything, first, force yourself to understand why it's true. Then, just take a moment to imagine how it connects to your world. That's it. That is the secret to much deeper learning.
So, I'll leave you with this challenge. Think about your day tomorrow. What's one thing you need to learn, whether it's for work, for school, or just for fun? And how are you going to approach it? Not as a rock, but as a sponge. What questions are you going to ask to truly understand it? That simple shift could be the start of a whole new way of learning for you.